screen. Okay. Now, in the previous lecture, I give you the tutorial for the, let's say, DDL triggers. Any question about DDL triggers? Any question about DDL triggers? Okay, so for today, I will go to visit once again the Logon triggers. Okay, yesterday I gave you one question covers the Logon triggers, but today I will go to cover it once again, or I will continue with the Logon triggers. So therefore, let me just access to the file. Okay, now for using Logon triggers, basically, these are the three case scenarios that I will go to highlight right now. Okay, the first one will be restricting user from logging in outside the permitted hours, which is basically I have executed yesterday. Then restricting the number of sessions for a specific login. I highlight about it, but I didn't basically execute the code. Then tracking login activity. That means it is like what I have done in audits. Okay, I can also apply it on Logon trigger by tracking who is the person who's trying to log into the system and so on and so on. Now, the thing that I want to highlight here is that you must be aware when you are working on Logon triggers, because always when the students apply Logon triggers, if the conditions were not correct, you will not be able to access to the system. You know, earlier when we use like the audit or let's say DDL triggers, we are not prevented basically from entering the system in the first place. Okay, but here no, this one, if something goes wrong, simply I will not be able to access the system. And many students earlier was having this problem, you know, to log in the system and so on. So you need to be aware for that. Okay, so usually I advise the students first go to apply these codes by creating, you know, exactly what is the code saying here. Then later you can, you know, modify the code to ensure that everything is, you know, okay. Now, in the previous lecture, we begin with the first Logon trigger, which is limiting connection after, let's say, office hours. And we have created here the trigger. So if I go for the server objects and I check here for triggers, notice we have the trigger already created here. So if I go for right click, then I go for script as, okay, that's just a new query. You'll notice here that this is the trigger that we have created. Okay, so let me just test it once again. Then I will modify it or alter the trigger and try to access or allow the user to access in the office times. So therefore, let me just go here and try to log in as Sami once again. So notice here we said that the timing is supposed to be between 9, right, and 2 o'clock. So I will go here. Just let me copy Sami. Okay, connect database engine. Then I will go for, let's say, SQL Server. So I will say we have here Sami, and the password is Sami1234. Okay, then I will say connect. Now notice here we have connected basically to Sami. Okay. Okay, 1 minute. Is the trigger activated? Let me just check. Okay, the time is and let me just disconnect and check the trigger once in. Okay, it is there. 1 minute, just to confirm, because it's supposed to excuse me, prevent me from accessing, or maybe because the time is I'm saying it is 14, not specifying the timing exactly. So let me just check one thing here. I will say, okay. So let me just modify this one here and make it as 13. Okay. So I will go to create the trigger. Because when I take the date part, even if it is, let's say, 20 here, it will consider to be as 14, right? Because I'm only taking the hour. So I will go to create the trigger once again. And then let's try now. So I'll log in once again to Sami. So I'll say connect. Database engine, then SQL Server. I'll go for Sami in the password, then connect. Notice here it give me the trigger was activated and says sorry, you are not allowed to access. And basically this is because of this trigger, because the timing is between, you are supposed to be, okay, or you can log in between, let's say 9 to 2 o'clock, or till 3 o'clock in this case, in our, at least our condition. Sign, how do you sign this to user a group? What do you mean by user group here? You mean if I want to assign it to a specific user? So okay, assign this to a user group. Okay. You want to check for, let's say, let's assume, for example, you want to check for roles, right? Let's assume, for example, if you have, let's say, security, you'll go for login. Then you're talking about basically the server role, right? Something like that. Okay. In this case, here in the, for the if statement, just I need to check for the condition. I didn't do this earlier. Usually I will assign it to a specific group, but basically just I need to check for the thing which is basically retrieving the role function. Just I need to check for the functionality. That means for the function that retrieve the role name. So it will be working the same thing. That means either it will be for the role or what? It will be for the user. But here, the if statement, I use the original login. So later, just I need to check what is the function to retrieve the roles, and I can say where the role is equal, this role, and then the other conditions. Okay, clear? I didn't do this earlier. Just I will check it, then I can update the codes. But it works. There is no issue here. And basically here it will be most likely not for the, let me just show you here. Because I have created the server role we have here. This is the built-in one. So usually later I can also what, if I want, I can what, create another server roles, right? So I can determine where this, or what are these login. That means who are the members in that server role. Okay, we can do that. So later, yes, I will check the functionality, okay, or the function that retrieve the server role, and later I can just update the code. Okay, clear? So no worries, later, yes, I will send you the updated code when I check what the functionality to do that. But for now, basically, I usually apply it on, let's say, individual users. Okay. So that means this question, I will follow up with it. This question, I will follow up with it. Clear? Now, when I go here for modifying the code, and let's assume that I said, okay, the date part here is, let's say, 15. Then I want to modify my code. So highlight execute. Now I will be supposed to able to log into my server, because now the timing is what, between 9 and 3. In this case, if I try to log into Sammy once again, so I'll go here for SQL Server, then I will say Sammy, then I'll go for connect. Notice here I'll be able to connect to Sammy because simply it is in the timing between, let's say, 9 to 3 o'clock. Okay, clear? Any question? Okay, so this is the first condition that we have, restricting user from login outside let's say, hours. The second one will be restricting the number of sessions per or for a specific login. Now, I explained this from theory part earlier. Now I'll go to apply the code. So first of all, just to avoid, for the first time you are working on, let's say, this, let me just disconnect from Sammy. When you're working on, let's say, logon triggers, ensure at least for the first time you are always doing what? Disabling the triggers. That means if you have previous trigger, just at least disable the previous trigger, because sometimes you'll have conflict. And as I mentioned earlier, the issue with the logon triggers, when you have a conflict directly, you will be having problems to log into the system. Not like other triggers like DML, DDL. If there is conflict, okay, we'll get an error, but you are in the system, so you can fix it easily. So here for now, just I'll go for disable this logon trigger, just to ensure what it is not conflicting with the next trigger that I want to do. Okay, or you can delete the trigger that as you wish. So for the second trigger here, I will go to create another login called Susan. Okay, with the password Susan1234. Let me just create this login here. So highlight execute. So now when I go for security logins, now here we have Susan, right, as login here. Now notice here, to be able to apply this trigger, okay, I will go to grant something called view server state. Now you'll notice that some of the logon triggers, maybe you write the code, you executed it, okay, but for some reason, because the trigger will go to access some internal files in your SQL Server, if you didn't add the grant permission for some conditions, like in this case, SQL Server says, or Microsoft says you must grant a view server state, most likely later you'll not be able to retrieve the information here, or maybe you'll have problems when you try to log into the system in first place. Okay, so in this case here, I'll go to grant the view server state to Susan. Now this permission basically is on the server level. Now, if you remember earlier when we discussed about the permissions, we were basically focusing on what? Permissions related to accessing, let's say, tables, like let's say grant, select, insert, update, and so on. But also we have permissions for what? For the server level. That means what you can do on the server level. This is one of them, which is viewing, let's say, the server state. So I will go to grant here view server state to Susan. So highlight execute. Okay, now if you go to check here for Susan properties, then I will go for okay, securables. Notice here you have this some of the permissions on the, let's say, what do you call it, on the server level, and now one of them usually when you create the login, one of them will be the connect to SQL will be granted, and now we have the view server state. And who is the grantor? It is SA system administrator, which is in my case, it is Abdullah. Okay, so this is, you can check also this permissions letters on the server level basically. Okay, now when I go for the trigger here, create a trigger, let's say limited multiple, let's say concurrent connections. Once again, it is on all server for logon. As begin, notice here I will use the same statement, which is if original login is equal to Suzanne, because original login will retrieve the current person who tried to log in. Okay, and select count all from system.dmx, exc sessions. Now, usually these are, we can retrieve this information from what? From the views. That means if I go to any database, like if I go here to my master database, here, then I go for, let's say, tables or views, sorry. In the views, usually, I will have the system views. Then you will have all this, what we call it as system catalog. We have what? System catalog. So if I want to check for system, okay, system DM. Let me just check here. It's supposed to be somewhere here. System. Where is it? System DM execute, then sessions. This one. Okay. So this view here, if I go for right click and select the top 10 rows, you can view the, the information about the sessions that we have. But basically here, I will go to use the query. In reality here, you can find a lot of useful, let's say, built-in, I would say, views, which is provided by the system. And usually this is where we include basically a lot of information for the system catalog. So later you can, refer to some of these, even though now in the next session, when I go for the encryption, I will heavily depend on some of the views here when I apply the encryption and so on, to see how the encryption, let's say, affect my database and so on. Okay, so to access this usually files, or let's say to access this views, you can go for master database, then you'll go for views, then system view, then you can get this view. So here simply I'm saying the following. I will saying that select count all from this view, which is system.dm underscore exec sessions, where is user process. So here why I said this is user process equal to 1, because here I'm saying that this session is created by the user. It is not created by the system, because you'll notice later that some of the sessions will be created by the user, okay? Sorry, by the system. And original login name is equal to Suzanne, which is greater than 7. Then I will go here to ring this error message. Now here, maybe I will make it 5. Usually when I log into Suzanne for the first time, most likely the counter of the session will be more than 1 in general, okay? So I will go to highlight the trigger here, then I'll go for execute. First of all, let me just confirm that this one, okay, is granted. Then I'll go for create the log on trigger here. Now I'll try to log into Suzanne, okay, and let me do the following. So I'll go here, connect database engine. I'll go for SQL Server, then Suzanne. Let me just check what is the password. Okay, now notice here, even though I said that the counter is supposed to be less than 5, but when I try to log in, directly give me this error. That means SQL Server says, okay, I have created more than 5 sessions. Okay, so what I will do right now is the following. I will modify here the trigger, okay, alter, and then I will go to make it as if it is greater than 7, for example. And let me execute this once again. So I'll go for disconnect, and I'll connect once again. Notice here, I was able to log in as Suzanne, okay, to the system. Now, when I go to execute the following query, here I want to check the login name and how many sessions are there. So here just I show the count and for the sessions, okay, group by login name. So highlight, execute. Notice here it says Suzanne already have what 4 sessions. That means these 4 sessions was created basically when I log into um, let's say SQL Server using what Suzanne as the credentials or Suzanne as the username. Also we have SA, which is the system administrator, okay, and we have um, Abdullah, okay, and we have the NT, let's say services telemetry. Now, when I go here for Suzanne, let's try to do the following. Just I want to increase the sessions. That means we said now it's supposed to be, if it is greater than 7, please go and show this message and do rollback and do rollback. So therefore, I will go here to right click. Then I will go to say, okay, let's go for a new query. Now, when I go to create a new query, that means I have opened another session for whom? For Susan. So if I want to count the session once again, earlier it was 4, so it's supposed to be 5. So not here, it is what? 5 sessions. Okay. Then I'll try to do what? Another session. So I'll go here to say a new query. Then I'll go here and check how many sessions are there. Execute. So now we have what? We have 6 sessions. Then I will go to the what? Create another session. Till now, notice I didn't get any error because till now it is what? I have 7 sessions. Now, when I open another session, okay, here the condition says if it is greater than 7 sessions, do what? Prevent Suzanne from log into the system. That means it will disconnect the connection that we have here. So to check for that. Now, what happens usually if I didn't specify this for a specific user and it was for the administrator, for example, that's the end of the story. Later you will be suffering. Okay, and many students have faced this issue earlier. So now when I go for new query, notice here it says okay, it is there, so that means the number of sessions now is 8, and it says now login failed, Suzanne, due to the trigger execution. Okay, so if now I try to access, let's say to Suzanne once again, let me just check. Okay, notice here it will give me the error, and now if I disconnect and try to connect once again, let's see. Notice here it says that the sessions till now are there, so in this case I'm not able to log in as Suzanne. Okay, now if I try to go here and then close some of these sessions, so let's see what will happen. So I'll go here to log in, sorry, close this one, then close this one once again, close also this one, and this one. So now I have what close some of these sessions. So let me just as administrator here to check for how many sessions are there per user. So highlight execute. Notice now Suzanne goes back to 4 sessions. And now when I try to log in, it's supposed to connect to Suzanne. So I'll go here for Suzanne. And then let's try to connect. It will be there. It will be there. Clear? Any question till now?
Sure. So when you hit one new query means one session?
Yes, at least you other things also can create sessions, but basically the easiest one is to go for one query. Like when you say new query, it's like I'm opening a new file, so it will be a new session and so on. Okay, so this is one of the things that create sessions in SQL. It is the easiest to view because you can count it easily. Okay, clear? So here also, let me just highlight this thing. Here I can check all the sessions which is created by Suzanne. So here we'll go to check this information. So notice here we have how many sessions right now? We have 4 sessions. Okay. This is if you want to go for the details of these sessions and so on. So here you can get some extra info about these sessions and so on. So this is the second use of what? Of logon triggers. That means I can limit the resources per user. Now, any question for the second one? The last one will be a tracking login activity. So here we are doing the same thing, which is earlier in audit, I said, okay, I want to track the login, okay, for the users, right? Either it is successful or failure. The same thing here, I can what? Create an audit table, but this time we'll go to record the information about what? About logins using log on trigger, using log on trigger. So that means I can apply this using audit basically, or log on a trigger. But here, since I can create the table, that means I can customize the table. I can customize the table. Okay. Also, I want to just to highlight one thing here. If I want to check the error messages, which is generated by all these triggers, because notice only I get, okay, there is an error for, let's say the error, let's say execution, the triggers are execution, but basically I don't get any extra details. Now to view the details, you can go here to management, okay, SQL Server logs, then you'll go for the current log. So if I go here now as administrator, and I go here to what you call it as management, okay, then I will go for what you call it as SQL Server logs, and then I can go for what? For the current log here. Now, if I open this one, let me just open it. You notice that the triggers that was executed earlier, the message will be clearly stated here. So let me just check. Okay. Okay, so this login successful integrated. Then let's go down. Okay, Suzanne was able to connect. Okay, this one. Notice this is what? This is the error message, which is we provided in the trigger statement. Notice here you are not authorized to log in as you already have 7 active sessions. As you can see here, this is what? This is the error message. So even if you are not able to see the message in the when the login was, let's see, activated or the trigger was activated, but if you check here for the SQL Server logs, you can see, okay, what is the exact message that you are facing at that time. That means when I execute or when the trigger was executed, when the trigger was executed. Okay, clear? I think also if you go scroll down here, also see what the other one, which is the setting about the office hours and so on. This one, you are not authorized to log in after office hours. Okay, you are not authorized to log in after office hours. After office hours. Clear? Any question till now? So far, so good. So now we will go for what? For the last example here, which is what? I want to create an audit table. Okay, this audit table will go to save all the logins records. Now, therefore, in this case, we need to do the following. First of all, I think I created this earlier in a previous class. Let me just check. Audit table. Okay, it seems that I deleted it earlier. Now, first of all, what I want to do, I want to create a database. Then I want to create the audit table, because now we are talking about what? We are talking about the server level, about the server level. So therefore, create database audit DB. Okay. Okay. One minute. What he is talking about? Let me check. Create database audit DB. Okay. It seems, just give me 1 minute. It seems that I delete, or maybe what I have done, I have detached the database, but till now it is exist. Okay, so let me just go to delete it. Sorry. Most likely I have done detach, but I didn't delete the database file. So it's not appearing in my SQL Server. What is basically exists in my database? In my hard disk. This is, by the way, one of the ways to, sometimes I will detach my database. Let me show you, because I'm not sure if I covered this earlier or not. Now, one of the approaches to move my database from one location to another, the first one, it can be using backup. That means I'll go to do backup, then later I'll go to do restore, which I'll cover it after encryption. Okay, and at that time I'll go to apply encryption for backups. Now, the other way will be what you call it as detach. So if I go for Dream Home database tasks, then we have something called what? Detach. Detach means just simply, okay, detach my database from the database management system. Because for now, let me just show you what I mean by that. For now, if I try to go to Dream Home database, for example, okay, Dream Home. Okay, Dream Home is not here. I put it in another location. Let's go for Film Club, for example. Okay. Now, if I try to copy these two files, for example, assume I want to maybe do a backup. So I'll say, okay, copy. Then I'll go to maybe, let's say, desktop, for example, and try to paste here. You will get an error. Why? Because now this database is currently used by what? By SQL Server. It is like you open Microsoft Word document and you try to copy it to another location, for example, it will give you an error because it is underused by one of the softwares. Now, my database is under use of what? SQL Server. So what we can do, one of the approaches is what? I will go here and I will say, okay, let's go right click, then tasks, then I'll go for detach. When I go for detach here, this means what? This means remove, okay, my database from SQL Server. But as a file, it will remain on my hard disk, and later I can maybe make a copy, maybe I'll put it, let's say, a backup in the cloud or so on, or maybe I will send it to my friend, okay, or group member and so on. Now, after that, if I want to bring it back, I will go here to databases, right click, then I'll have attach. And here I need to provide usually the MDF and the LDF file, the MDF and the LDF file. Then I can get this database connected to my SQL server once again. Okay, so in my case, what I have done here, I have detached the audit DB, okay, and then I forget to delete it. So now when I want to create it once again, it says, sorry, you are not able to create that file because simply it is exists. And we don't have a SQL server the permission to replace the file. Sorry, okay. So I will go here to delete the two files. Okay, now they are deleted. So I will go back here to create my database once again. So highlight, execute. Now audit DB is already created as refresh. Okay. So it is created as you can see here. Now the next thing I want to do is to use for sure audit DB, then to create a table for audit. So here in this table, I will go to record the following information. I will go to create the system user. I will go to create or to save the DB user. Then I'll go to create or store the SP ID. Then I'll go to also save the logon time. So highlight, execute. Okay, so now we have a new table called what? Server logon history. Server logon history. Now, for sure, the table is empty. Let me just review it. Now let's go to create a logon trigger. So I will say here, create a trigger. Okay, then this is the name of the trigger on all server for logon as begin. Insert into audit DB. Now here you need to add the database name. Okay, because you are working on the server level, so you must define the database name. Then after that, the table name. Okay, so insert into audit DB, DBO server logon history. So this is the schema, which is DBO in our database, as you can see here. Select system user. Okay, user. Then the global variable. When I have double at, that means I'm dealing with the global variables. You can later check for the global variables. In SQL Server, they are not many. There are few global variables. Okay, this is one of them. Then I will get date function to retrieve the date and time. So I'll go to highlight this, or I'll go to create this, let's say, trigger. So execute. So now when I check for the triggers once again, let me just disconnect. Okay. Now, first of all, I will go for the object or server objects once again. Let's go to just refresh the triggers. Now I have 3 triggers. The same thing, I will advise you for the first time to disable the trigger, just to ensure that everything is, there is no conflict, okay? So right click, I'll go to disable this one, then right click, disable this one here. So now the only one which is enabled is server logon trigger, server logon trigger. Now the same thing here. If I want to apply this condition, I need to give Suzanne some permission. In this case, I will grant control server to Suzanne. Okay. Otherwise, if I try to log in the system, it will not be able to record the information here in this table. Okay, so therefore I'll say grant control server to Suzanne. First of all, let me just use master database. Okay, because if you have the audit DB, it will not give the permission, right? So I'll go for execute. And now I will go to, okay, try to log in using, let's say, Suzanne credential, basically. So I'll go here to connect. Database engine. Let's go for Windows authentication first. Execute. So let's see if there is anything in my table. Highlight execute. Notice here it was recording Abdullah. Okay. And the issue here is you'll notice here that there will be some duplicated values for the logins when you check it. That means even if you check the, let's say, the SQL Server log files, always you will find some, let's say, more than one line for, let's say, logins and so on. It seems this is thing which is created by SQL Server internally. So it is common that when you do that for the login, you will not only have one record. Notice here we have different, let's say, logins. It is the same login basically, but here internally it seems more than one, let's say, session. So notice here we have, let's say, SPID 60, 65, 67, and so on. Okay. Now I'll try to log in as Suzanne once again. So let me just get the password. So I'll go here for SQL Server, then Suzanne, then I'll go for connect. So I was not able to connect to Suzanne, okay, as login name here. Then here I will go to check the data from the audit DB table. Let me just check the code here, highlight execute. So notice now Suzanne is connected to my database, and also it's recorded Abid, Mail, Abdullah, and so on. Okay, clear? Any question till now? Now, other useful commands just I have highlighted here. The first one, select all from system server triggers. Also, this is a view, okay, system view basically. So this can show me all the triggers that now I have on the, let's say, log on trigger on the server level. So we have these three triggers. Also, I will know if they are disabled or enabled. So notice here I said this 1, 2, they are disabled. The last one here is enabled, okay? Okay, and also I can select the DB name from masters under, let's say, system processes, where SPD ID is the equal the global variable here. So let me just show you this one. So now who is the person, or what is the database that we have currently? It is what master database. That means if I go here to change this one to town, for example, 2000, let's say 21, then I run this once again, I will get the name of the database. It's just useful queries that you can use later when you do the coding. Clear? Any question till now? Okay, so far so good. So this is basically, by this we have covered the DML triggers, DDL triggers, and log on triggers and log on triggers. And logon triggers is recorded from you in the assignment question, in the assignment question, basically. So any question before I finish this topic, then give you a break, and then we'll begin with the next topic, which is encryption.
So for the assignment, which one should we actually use? Like what is it means by logon trigger? Is it all of this?
All of this can be logon triggers. That means
So
you
we
can choose
just
any one
choose
of
one?
these. Yes, yes, just choose one. And relatively later, I want to highlight in the assignment question, um, because I think, I'm not sure if it was modified or not. Okay, let me just check one thing. Just give me 1 minute before I give you the break. Now, when I refer to the assignment question, okay, let me just go for Teams, and let's go for files. Okay, when I go here for assignment, right? Okay, now I go here for the requirements. Okay. Okay, now here, and they will implement, let's say, the log on a trigger. Okay, some marks may be awarded for the feature. Okay, now usually I will ask. Okay, that's okay. Just here, when you go for the implement a log on trigger, okay, when you go for implementation of log on trigger, you can choose any of these case scenarios or maybe other case scenarios. But these are, I would say, like the common case scenarios there. But you can have, let's say, other case scenarios. Okay, so you need each one of the group members supposed to implement one trigger. Just I remember here, I need to from you to check this one here for implementing a historical data model. Now we said that each member is required to produce 2 DML triggers. Now here, the first one, because one of them confusion happens, maybe because the text was not clear, I would say. It is not the mistake of the students in first place. Here, I need two things. First, I need from the students to implement a trigger to track or to provide the historical model. That means you know the audit table. But also, the second trigger is supposed to be a generic trigger. It means you can create a trigger, okay, and that trigger will be what? Generic one. That means you can apply it to some other type of security features, but not basically to track, or let's say not following up with a track, let's say audit table, because what happens earlier, each student will go to create two triggers, okay, by applying what the information or save the information in the audit table. And that means he's just repeating what the second query. So just I want to make this clear from now. The first one will be an audit. That means basically it will be a trigger where you will save the information in the audit table. But the second trigger is supposed to be any generic trigger as DML trigger. So don't do the two triggers, okay, as what? As historical model to track all modifications and so on. So one I will have the audit table, the other one it will be generic trigger. Clear? I hope it is clear. I hope it is clear. Okay, so for now, I'll give you a break for, let's say, 10 minutes. Then we proceed with the next topic, which is database encryption. Okay, attention please. So let's begin with the next topic, which is database security, database security. Sorry, database encryption. Okay. Okay, so for today's topic, as usual, first of all, I will go to highlight some concepts, okay, from theory perspective. Then I will go to apply it on SQL Server or SQL Server. Now, what is encryption? Basically, encryption is the process of transforming information, referred to as plain text, using an algorithm called cipher to make it unreadable to anyone except those processing special knowledge, usually referred as a key. The result of the process is encrypted information in cryptography, referred to as ciphertext. Now, basically, the concepts of encryption and so on, since you are, let's say, security students, so for sure you know all of these concepts. Just I'm highlighting these concepts once again. So basically, it's not something new. It is not something new for you. Okay, maybe the implementation on SQL Server, yes, but not basically the basic concepts. Okay, now when I go for encryption on SQL Server, okay, in this diagram here, notice the following: you will have the backup files. Okay, you will have the SQL Server data. Like for example, I will have the, as I show you, right, I will have, for example, say the MDF file. Then later I will have the backup file, which is .bak. Then I will have the SQL Server memory. I will have the SQL Server instance, right? Then the client will connect to my SQL Server using communication link. Usually nowadays we are using basically the internet or maybe LAN network and so on. Then for the client, we have what? The client file. Now, when we discuss about the scope of database security, basically, database security basically don't cover the client file system. That means for me now, I am having my own lab. If I connect to SQL Server, let's say in ABU, for example, server, my files are not protected, right? The SQL Server can't protect my files, basically. The same thing, it can't protect my device, right? I don't have security. This is my own, I will say, responsibility to ensure that my system is secure in first place. But SQL Server can begin to apply security from the communication link. That means if you're connected to SQL Server, I can ensure that you need to use some sort of, let's say, protocols and so on, okay, to connect to SQL Server. Also, SQL Server can go to encrypt basically SQL Server, let's say, memory. Now, basically, this feature is to some extent the new feature, okay, where earlier memory were not encrypted, but now we can enforce encryption on SQL Server memory. For sure, the also the encryption will be applied either on the whole database, okay, or on a specific data inside my tables in my database. And basically in my, because encryption here is usually a huge topic in general. So here basically I'll focus on one type of encryption, which is how to do encryption for the columns, okay, inside my tables. Okay, so basically I'll not cover, okay, the SQL Server, say memory encryption, or how to encrypt the whole, let's say, database and so on. Also, in the next lecture, I will discuss about backup files and also how to encrypt backup files. So basically here, I will focus on what, or I will cover two topics, I would say, or two concepts, or let's say, of encryption under SQL Server. The first one, focusing on how to encrypt columns or specific data in my tables. Okay. Second one is to how to secure my backup files, my backup files. Okay, clear? Any question till now? Okay, so far so good. So now let's go for the next 2 or 3 slides. And these slides are very, very important for you to understand them, because if you understand this diagram that I want to highlight right now, later you'll understand how security is applied on SQL Server. Okay. Now, when you are dealing with SQL Server as database management system, I will have something called encryption hierarchy. Encryption what? Hierarchy. That means in SQL Server, I can apply a different way of encryptions, okay, till I reach my data. Okay, and this is what I want to highlight in these diagrams. Maybe some of the diagrams here will not be so clear till I go for the implementation, but at least I need from you to focus with me. So just, to try to clarify these pictures. Now, the first diagram that you will see if you go to check to Microsoft, let's say documentation, usually this diagram. And this diagram, you just make it as full screen, okay, just to make it clear. Now, in general, the Windows operating system, okay, Windows operating system will have something called Data Protection API. So Windows operating system level, we have something called Data Protection API, which stands for DP API. Okay, it protects the service master key. Now, this is the first level of our hierarchy, which is the Windows encryption. And this is why when you log in here to SQL Server, right, when you say connect database engine, and then I'll go for Windows authentication. Why it uses Windows authentication? Because basically it depends on what? It depends on this one here, which is DB API. That means it will assume, since you log into the system, so that means you have the enough credentials to log into the database management system, Okay, and this is why you have what? The Windows authentication mode when you try to log into the server, when you try to log into the SQL Server. Okay, so this is the first point. Now, this DB API, which is the Windows encryption level or security level, basically, will go to protect something called service master key. Okay, it will go to protect something called what? Service master key, which is created when you are doing SQL Server setup. Now, we know that I can install, let me ask this a question. Can we install more than one database management system on the same operating system? That means, can I install 2 SQL servers on my Windows right now? Can I do that?
Yes.
The answer is what? The answer is yes. And at that time, we call each one of these installations as SQL Server instance. Now, attention please for this point. Now, if I go here to the server name, and then I go for browse for more, notice here how many server I have, or how many database, let's say, engines I have. I have one only. Right? Now, I can right now do the following. I can go to install SQL Server once again. So I will have another database engine. Another instance. Each one of these, we call it as SQL Server instance. To make it more clear, it is like when you install 2 operating systems on your laptop or on your computer. Okay, so I can install more than one database management system, okay, in what? On one server. Now, the common example for that, usually when I go for web hosting. When we go for web hosting, a lot of time, the companies, what they will do, for assumption, we have Windows hosting, which is not famous, but assume that. In this case, assume we have, let's say, Windows Server 2 or SQL Server 2008 and Windows, let's say, SQL Server 2019. So some of the users, okay, some of the users, they will say, I don't want to migrate from 2008 to 2019. Why? Because 2008 is working great. I don't want to have any, issues with data. Everything is stable. I am, satisfied with what I have. That's all. So what they will do, they will go to install more than one SQL Server instance. Now, why I'm highlighting this here? Because in the encryption process, the service master key will be created per instance. That means if you have two instances, so I will have two service master keys. But the DB API will be one because it is the base one. Okay, clear? So the service master key, once again, will be created when I do the installation for SQL Server. That means service master key is something that we don't manipulate with. That means DB API and service master key. These are things that we usually don't create as users. They are created. The first one when I install the Windows operating system. The second one when I install the SQL Server. Our work usually will begin from database master key. Our work will begin from where? Using database master key. Now you will notice here, you have BW means password, okay? We have BWs, right? Then we have these layers, then I go for encrypted data. Now this diagram, unfortunately, is not so clear. So usually I refer to go to the next diagram to explain the encryption hierarchy, which is this one. Now, what this diagram represent? What this diagram represent? If I want to encrypt the data, I have different hierarchies or levels to do that. I can use it simply by saying, okay, I have my data, so let me just I apply password. And later in the codes, I will go to give you something called passphrase. So okay, I want to maybe let's say protect this piece of information. So I'll say, okay, just protect it using what? Using a function called passphrase. But this level of encryption is what? It is very weak. Or this level of protection is very weak. Now you may say, no, I want to encrypt my data by doing the following. First of all, I will go to create my database master key. And this database master key will be protected by a password. Okay, so I will go to create the database master key, but this will be let's say protected by the password. Also, after database master key, I'll go to create something called certificate. Okay, that means I'll go to protect the certificate with the database master key. Then I'll go to create symmetric key, which will be protected by the certificate. Then I will go to encrypt my data. Okay, now all these lines here, as you can see, these are what? These are potentially different level of hierarchies. That means I can encrypt my data using any one of these approaches, as you can see here. Clear? Clear till now? Any question? So the concept here simply is that if I want to encrypt data, I can go from the basic things, which is a simply provide password, and I can go for more complex hierarchies by what? By providing more than one, let's say, level. So for example, the default one, by the way, the recommended one by SQL Server, basically, or by Microsoft, is that I will go for database master key, then I'll go to create a certificate, then I'll go for symmetric key, then I'll go for encrypted data. Now, we know if I want to ask which one is faster, symmetric key or asymmetric key? Which one is faster, symmetric key or asymmetric key? Which one is faster, symmetric key or asymmetric key? For sure, symmetric, right? Symmetric is much faster. There is no comparison between symmetric and asymmetric. Asymmetric is slow. And this is why the recommended approach by SQL Server is to use what? Symmetric key. Notice here it says, okay, I will go to apply symmetric key to encrypt my data. Why? Because encrypting the data using the symmetric key is faster, even though we know that asymmetric key is more secure. But now you need to balance between what? Between performance and security. So if my data is really something I need to secure and timing is not really important, most likely I'll go for what? Going to create a symmetric key in first place instead of what? Using symmetric key, as you can see here. Okay, I hope this is clear. I hope this is clear. So what I will do later when I go for the practical part, I will show you how we go to create database master key, which is protected by a database master, let's say a key password, then how to create the certificates. Then these certificates will go to encrypt the symmetric key. Then how to use symmetric key to encrypt data. Usually I will focus here on encrypting columns. And also I'll give at least maybe one example, okay, to what? To how the password will go to use simply like simple password to encrypt my data in general. Okay, clear? Now let me ask the following. What is EKM module? What is EKM module? Multiple authentication? Oh, but what is it? In nature, what is it? Okay, let me show you what is, what you call it as AKM module. AKM module basically is a hardware. This hardware, okay, this hardware will be used. Okay. Where is the devices? Now, AKM basically is a hardware that I have, and I will go to add an encryption key on it. Like earlier, we were using something like USB drive, okay, or pen drive, and then the encryption key, either to be symmetric or asymmetric, will be installed on that drive. So if you want to run the system, for example, or if you want to decrypt the data, you must have that hardware component, to do the operation. Now, usually we use this in case what? In case if, let's say, we have really something which is I need to secure, you know, if we have really have something what? Something like I need to ensure we have a high level of security. So we'll go to use some of this, let's say EKM, let's say modules and so on. So SQL Server also support this one in general, Okay, clear? Any question till now? Okay. Now, these three diagrams basically just highlighting how the encryption hierarchy will be I will say usually this one is the most, I will say, clear one, because it shows you all the possible what combinations to encrypt your data. So either it can go for password alone, or I can go for password, which will protect symmetric key, then encrypt the data, or can go for password, symmetric key, then another symmetric key, then I'll go to encrypt my data, and so on. So here you can check what all the possible combinations. Now later in your assignment, okay, I will ask you to do what? I will ask you to apply the encryption, and each one of the students supposed to implement it in different way. Okay, so I will not accept the same students at the same group will go to implement the encryption in the same way. No, you are supposed to what? Increment it in different ways. That means different hierarchies, different hierarchies. The same thing goes here. This is just another okay picture just to explain the hierarchical or the encryption hierarchy basically. So say here we have the service master key encrypted by the DBA PI. So this is the service master key. This is the Windows level, right, which is the DBA PI. Then we have the SQL Server level, which is the service master key. And this is service master key is created by SQL Server. It's not created by us, okay? Usually, we will begin to create the keys on what? On our database level, starting from database master key, And here, basically, I will go to what? To check how I want to access the data. So I can begin with asymmetric, then symmetric keys, then data, then certificate, and so on. So that depends on what is the hierarchy that you want to use. In general, just let me highlight once again, SQL Server recommends, in general, to go from database master key to create certificates to the symmetric keys, then encryption key. This is their recommendation, okay? But usually developers will choose any of the hierarchies available. Okay. Now, when I go here to discuss about the keys, yes, I will go to highlight some concepts about each one of these keys that we want to use. So the first one will be the service master key. Second one will be database master key. Then we have the symmetric keys. Then we have asymmetric keys, and then we have certificates. Now, if I want to go for the hierarchy, if I want to write it down, in SQL Server, I will go to say, okay, we have service master key, database master key. Then later I will choose either symmetric keys or asymmetric keys or certificates, okay? But in general, if I go to look from different point of views, any key that I have will be either symmetric key or asymmetric key. If you go for the basic, not the hierarchy on SQL Server, on how I want to implement them. No, I'm talking about the type. All the keys that I have here, either they are either symmetric keys or what? Asymmetric keys. In general, okay? So let's see what is service master key. Service master key is the root of SQL Server encryption hierarchy. As such, there can only be one server master key per SQL Server instance. Have you said what is SQL Server instance? It is basically the one installation for SQL Server. So I can have more than one instances on my device, Now, the service master key is used to protect, encrypt other keys, mainly the database master keys. It cannot be used directly to encrypt data, and you cannot create one by yourself. So you'll see later when I create the database master key, by default, it will be protected by the service master key. Okay. And for me, I can't create service master key, and also basically I can't manipulate the service master key. That means I can't create that one by myself. Okay, so this is service master key. What is database master key? Database master key is the root of encryption hierarchy within a single database. That means when I go like for Dream Home database, for example, so I'll say, okay, this is what the database master key to that database. It is considered to be as asymmetric key. So notice here, when I say what is database master key for the classification, said earlier either we have symmetric keys or what? Asymmetric keys. So I will say here, it is what? It is symmetric key that is stored in its database and that can be used to protect certificates and asymmetric keys. Okay, so this is basically the database master key. Now, database master key itself is protected with one or more passwords and additionally with the service master key. Now, usually when we create, as I'll show you later in the code, usually when we create database master key, we said create, let's say, database master key protected or with password, then we give the password. So directly database master key will be protected usually by the service master key plus the passwords that I have provided, the password that I have provided. Clear? Any question till now? Okay, so what is symmetric key? Symmetric key basically is one key that is used for both encryption and decryption, right? And this information, I think this is clear for you. We just read it out. So encryption and decryption can be used by symmetric key. It is fast and suitable for routine use with sensitive data in the database. For SQL Server 2016, they support these algorithms: AES 128, AES 192, and AES 256. Now we'll check later if you check for the encryption in SQL Server. From time to time, either they add new encryptions or they are remove some of the encryptions. Let me show you what I mean by that. If I go here for, let me just copy this one, or let me just copy this one here. Okay, and let's go for Microsoft documentation. Okay, so I'll go here and server. Okay, choose an encryption algorithm. So let's see. Now, okay, encryption is one and so on. So you can use some of these encryptions, okay? But let me just highlight here. It is not there. Now, in one of the documentations, okay, when we discuss about the symmetric, some of the old ES, let's say, I don't remember the number, it was like 92 or 96, it was deprecated. That means simply database not necessarily says to use all the algorithms not recommended. You must set database to database compatibility level 1 to 1, let's say 120 or lower. Now, it is important later, especially in the future, if you're working on any database management system, to check what are the latest, let's say, encryption they are providing. You know, because each time maybe the encryption will become weak, so they provide a newer one and so on. So always we need to check for the latest, let's say, encryptions in the specific database management system. Okay, for now in SQL Server, they are supporting basically this as the symmetric keys that we have here in first place. Okay, now how the symmetric key, let's say, works basically. So here, if I have Alex and they have, let's say, the secret key or the symmetric key, I will say, so he can give or send a message, a copy to Mary, right? And then Mary will use that key to encrypt the data, which is the plain text. So I will have the ciphertext. So when Alex receives the ciphertext, he will go to use his key to, you know, encrypt or decrypt the data. Now here, the issue is that if this is the problem of the symmetric, let's say, encryption. If anyone code the key, simply he can, you know, go to, you know, just check all the data. And this is the major issue why later the asymmetric key or the concept of, let's say, private and public key appeared in encryption concepts. If I want to give it with an example, it is, imagine that you have, let's say, the house door, and you have a copies from what? From the same key. So maybe you give your brother one key or your sister another key and so on. So if in one case, one of personal key, well, let's say steal that key, he can simply just go to the house and he can open the house. This is what the symmetric key. Asymmetric key, on the other side, no. It is a special, it will have a special lock. This special lock will be open if you have the public key. That means, assume we have, let's say, two keys, the private and public. Private is something that you keep. No one, you are not sharing the private with any person. And the public key is another key. Okay, you are giving it to different persons. So that person, if any person, let's say, get the public key and he tried to open the door, he can insert it in that, slot for open his lock, but it says no. You need to have another key to open the door. Like if you're watching the movies and when they go for launching, let's say nuclear, let's say missiles, they are supposed to have what? Two keys, right? So you can say the first one is private, the second one is public. If anyone have the public, it will not be useful till you have what? The private one. And this is why asymmetric is more accurate or more secure, and also the algorithm on how this is applied is more complicated than symmetric key in general. Okay, I hope the concept is clear. So an asymmetric key is made up of private key and the corresponding public key, right? So each key can decrypt data encrypted by the others. Asymmetric key encryption and decryption are relatively resource intensive. Okay, and this is why, as I mentioned earlier, SQL Server usually not recommending to use what SQL, let's say, asymmetric, except if you really need, to ensure that that data is secure and performance-wise is okay for you. But they provide a higher level of security than symmetric encryptions. In SQL Server, asymmetric key can be used to encrypt symmetric key for storage in database. So the one that we have here, we have RSA, let's say 496, RSA 372, RSA 20, let's say 48, and so on. Okay. Also, if I want to check here for the SQL Server, let me just go here and let me just search by in all. Okay. So if I check this one here. So here we'll get what the syntax on how to create this one, but let me just check. Okay. Now notice here, for example, it says this is the one that we are using, okay, currently. But notice here it says that these two algorithms they were using earlier, like 2008 and till maybe let's say 2012 and so on, they were using these other algorithms, but now they are deprecated. So it is basically not recommended to use these databases. Okay, it is not recommended to use, not recommended to use this asymmetric key. So you need to, in general, just always check documentation for which algorithm is better to be used. Because we know the higher the algorithm, right, the more resources it will require, because the encryption will be a little bit more complicated, So here, this is the concept for the private and public key. So Alex have the private and public key. So I said, okay, I will go to send the public key to Mary. So Mary will go to use the public key to encrypt the data. But here, the only person who can decrypt the value will be the person who have the private key, will be the person who having the private key. Okay, clear? Any question till now? Okay, finally, we will have a term called certificate. And certificate is basically a public key. Is symmetric key? No, symmetric key is not public. Symmetric key considered to be, as usual, you call it as a private, the symmetric key. In reality, the concept public is not even there in symmetric key. Just we have a key, okay, called symmetric key, the same copy. But here, in asymmetric, it will be what? It will be public. Why? Because I can give this one to anyone. That means even I can publish it on the internet. I don't care. Because if anyone have that key, he can do anything till he have what? The other piece of information, like riddles. Right? So if you have the public key, I can just simply, and this is the power of asymmetric key basically. Because I can just simply give it to anyone. And if it's caught, you can just simply decrypt it. You need to have what? The private key. And this is the major source of the power of, not only it is secured as security, I mean by the algorithm itself, but also by what? By the, what do you call it? By the level of security provided, which is you need to have two keys basically, the public that you have and also the private. So for the symmetric, no, it is not considered to be as public. It will be like secret key. Nobody knows about it. Because you not give it to anyone for the symmetric key. Okay, clear? Any question? Okay. Now, when I go for certificates, certificates are basically public keys. That certificates basically, it is asymmetric, but I'll go for what? For the public key side. And the concept here is the following. Certificate usually will have more specific information. Like, for example, if I have, let's say, the public key, right? And that public key, it can be generic, right? I can just give it to anyone. Now, certificate will be more accurate. That means more certificate will have more information about the persons who are supposed to have the public key. So later I can verify what? If the public key they are using, it is referred to them or to someone else. Okay? So public key certificates, usually just called certificate, is additionally signed statement that binds the value of public key to the identity or the person, or it can be for device or service that hold the corresponding private key. So it is like when I generate the, later I will show you here, when I go for the certificate, I can say, or I can define who is the issuer of that certificate. So later when if I receive the public key and I want to decrypt the data, I will check, oh, if this is really coming from authenticated, let's say, source, or just simply a person maybe try to manipulate the system and so on. Okay, so usually certificates are issued and signed by a certification, let's say, authority called CA. The entity that receives a certificate from a CA is the subject of that certificate. Typically, the certificate contains the following information. It will have the public key of the subject, okay, the identifier information of the subject, such as the name and email address, then the validity period. This is the length of time that the certificate is considered valid. Now, notice one of the unique things about certificates is usually we provide what? We provide a specific time. That means they are not generic. They are not generic. That means the time, or in general, recommendation is always I will have an expiry time for the certificate. Okay, so yeah, I'll show you later. The default it will be 1 year. Like in that SQL server, if you said, okay, I create certificate, today is, let's say, 6th of October. So it will be, let's say, 2021, 6th of October, let's say, 2022. It will be what? It will be the next, sorry. It will be the length of that certificate in general. So that's all for the theory part. Later, I'll go for the practical component when I go for the next lecture. So any question till now? Any question till now? This is lecture or tutorial? Lecture, right? Okay, proceed. Okay, just I want to highlight that please make sure that I know that you are busy with the FYB, because I think the submission date for the FYB project, it will be on which date?
Next
week, Wednesday, sir.
Next week. Okay, good
Wednesday.
luck for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
make sure. Okay. Make sure that you begin with your assignment. Also, I know that you are busy with the FYB and so on, but also make sure that you begin with the assignment. At least just check it at least. If you didn't begin with it till now, some students I know they show me the work, so they begin already. But if you didn't begin with it, just make sure at least check it once again. And if you have any question, please refer to me. So to ensure that everything is moving smoothly. So,
Sir,
yes, sir.
Yakin Sha'lan is not available today because he's at the hospital with his friend. So he asked me to inform you that, and he sent you a message.
Okay, no worries. Now, yes, I will mark him.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, most welcome. Okay,
Sir.
anyone else? Yes.
Can I see you after the class? Just 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay.
Sure, thank you.
Sir, I have a question for the assignment.
Yes, sir.
Since our assignment is more of to the security part, like creating triggers and all those, so we don't need that much of data within the database. Am I right?
No need.
We don't need that much of a record in each of the tables that we made. No need, right, sir?
Because basically, I want to see how the concept works. That means how your implementation is done.
As in implementation, in terms of triggers and the DDL comments and all those.
Most likely, you'll not have a lot of data in the system. We are not simply say join statements and doing anything. No. Basically, it will be showing. That means what is important here is that you can prove to me that this technique, how it works and so on.
All right then, sir. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Oh, sir, another thing for this module, is there an exam?
Yes, there will be a test.
Oh, a test.
And yes, test will be most
that
likely. Let me check. Now the submission, it will be on 29th, right? As I remember, of October.
Yes, sir.
Most likely the test will be on 25th.
All right, sir.
Yes, I will go to, it will be one, later I will discuss about the structure. Okay, so I'll discuss about the test, but basically it will be 1 hour test, okay? 1 hour time. Later I will highlight about the things that you need to cover, we need to cover and so on. Okay, and the test will carry 40 marks, while the assignment will carry 60 marks.
All right then, thank you, sir.
Okay, most welcome.
Hello, sir, and Michael.
Hello.
If you guys don't mind, can I join your 5-minute session? Because I have something to ask regarding assignment also. I'm the same group as him.
Okay.
Okay, Michael, are you there?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Regarding the just now you mentioned about the historical the assignment historical model, something like that. So each group member will create. I mean, in one group we create one historical model, and then we have to generate DML trigger. Am I right, for each member?
No. For each member, each one of you will go to generate one historical model. That means you'll go to create the audit tables. Each one of the group members. Also, the second thing, you need to create a generic DML trigger.
Okay, so in
that
total
means-
there will be 3 tables. One is historical model and 2 generate DML triggers.
Yes, but it will be not only 3, it will be for each, because each member is supposed to create 2 triggers. So in total, I will have
Yes.
6 triggers.
Yes, 6 triggers and 6 triggers and 3 historical model.
No, yes,
Uh,
you can include the historical model inside. That means it is included. So
it's
like I have
included,
3
so-
audit, yes, 3 audit tables, like for example, historical models, and the 3 generic DML triggers.
Oh, so 3. Okay,
That's
I
right.
understand. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Most welcome. Okay. Anyone else before I finish the lecture? So that's all for today, and see you next week. Assalamu alaikum.